Quaid Azam, Part 367. But I know this that they have got a mandate from the Muslim League to move this amendment. I feel sorry for them. This is not a place today for acting on the mandate. This is a place today to act on your conscience and to act for the good of the country. For a community to think that its interests are different from that of the country in which it lives is a great mistake. Assuming that we agreed today to the reservation of seats, I would consider myself to be the greatest enemy of the Muslim community because the consequences of the steps in a secular and democratic state, those who do not trust the majority cannot obviously come into the government. Accordingly, you will have no share in the government. You will exclude yourselves and remain perpetually in a minority. Then, what advantage will you gain? Is that why there is in this sense of disappointment and tragedy? Perhaps yes, but also perhaps because we continue to repeat the great errors of those epochal decades. Take minoritism again. Mr. M.G. Akbar, in an erudite magisterial essay, analyzes the challenge of it convincingly in a yet to be published work, The Major Minority. At what point in the story of the last 1,000 years did Indian Muslims become a minority? The question is clearly rhetorical. Muslims have been in a numerical majority on the Indian subcontinent. Also, then, did Indian Muslims consider themselves a minority during the Mughal rule, which was finally buried more than 100 years after it had become important? In the rubble of the War of 1857, Muslims formed only 11% of the population of the most powerful Muslim princely states in the British era. Hyderabad, 84% were Hindus. Did the Muslims of Hyderabad consider themselves a minority as long as the descendants of Nizam ul Mulk, a Mughal governor who carved out an independent state of the Shield Empire in 1723, ruled them? No. A minority, therefore, is not a consequence of the numbers, but a definition of empowerment. As long as Muslims identified with the state were confident that they could expect economic benefits as well as jobs in the bureaucracy, judiciary, and military, and their amane awwal liberty of religion, imani awwal, was protected. Demographic figures were irrelevant. That is why they were then psychologically not a minority, and yet continues Akbar in 1948, as soon as the Nizam was deposed and Hyderabad was absorbed into two new provinces, Union of India, and the same Muslims suddenly began to think themselves of a minority. Why? An answer to this would settle a number of questions, I think. It is this in a false minority syndrome that the dry rot of the partition first set in, and then unstoppably it afflicted the entire structure, the magnificence of the edifice of an united India, of a united India. The answer, cure, Jinnah asserted, lay only in parting, and Nehru and Patel and the others of the Congress also finally agreed. Thus was born Pakistan. However, minoritism in India stayed back and has now actually become even more emphasized, more acute, for we know how I have a precedent to follow, with which us is more binding than even constitutional provisions. Suicidal, no doubt, but we persist in the flagrant masochism. In Pakistan, it found new sectarian designs to assert minoritism. As in Bangladesh, too, there in reality, the Hindu of an undivided Bengal had actually assented to a division of Bengal. So, in all this, what have we resolved? I can't find any answer for this, entire episode of the breaking up of India in 1947 is one of those rare conundrums of histories which appears to be an answer, but the reality is very far from it. Such paradoxes have no answer, but as in the life, so in politics and in history too, paradoxes quite often resolve contradictions.